ladrones. Más que todo el ladrón, ¿no? El que es consciente va a pagar y va a saber lo que vale el trabajo de campesino.
Our relationship with the coffee we drink often begins and ends at a favourite cafe, or gets reduced to a simple but critical step in a morning routine. But what would happen if every time we drank coffee, we were automatically transported to where it was grown? What if we could see the who, the where, and the what behind every cup? I started this project with a simple idea: to explore something that I consume every day, yet know very little about. Unfortunately for me, the list of things I came up with that fit these criteria was disappointingly long. But sat in my favourite nearby cafe, I realised that I didn't need to look any further at all, because the idea was already in my hands. Coffee. Every year on Earth, we consume about 821 billion cups of coffee. That's 2.25 billion cups per day. Assuming that it takes us about 15 minutes to drink one cup, humanity collectively spends approximately 23.4 million years drinking coffee every single year. In comparison, to spend a few weeks on a mission to learn more about the coffee I drink didn't really feel like a big ask. For all the time and money I spend on coffee, either at home or in cafes, I had never made any tangible effort to learn about it properly. The packaging always seems to hint at stories. I wanted to go and find the story behind my coffee for myself. So I bought a bag of coffee beans, looked on the back to find out where they were from, and made plans to get to the plantation they were grown on in Guatemala. Antigua Guatemala, the region where these coffee beans were grown, 5,450 miles away from the cafe I bought them in England. Whoever designed it actually did a really good job. I mean, it's almost bang on. In about 2 weeks' time, I'm hopefully going to the plantation, the exact plantation where this bag of beans come from. Let's go! Bien, hermano, bien.
Bueno, hermanito, que Dios los bendiga.
Before going straight to the plantation my beans were grown on, I wanted to get to know Guatemala a little bit first. So I came to the beautiful Lake Atitlan in the region of Solola. At 340 meters deep, it's the deepest lake in Central America and sits in a volcanic crater that formed from an eruption that took place around 84,000 years ago. Here in Solola, an estimated 96% of the population identifies as indigenous Maya. The towns dotted along these shores are home primarily to Maya people from the Kaqchikel, Quiche and Sotujil ethnic groups. Everyone I met here was so welcoming, and with every conversation we had, I learned more and more about just how ingrained coffee is into Guatemala's history, economy and identity. I also saw firsthand that coffee's popularity was under no threat from alternative options like Marks and Spencer's English breakfast tea served with milk. Cheers.
No puede por tus dientes.
Bueno, está bien,
Como ya
hacemos
no
así.
tengo dientes.
Claro, sí. Bueno, cheers. ¿Le gusta? ¿No le gusta?
Tengo que tomar, aunque no me gusta.
No. Pero no le gusta tanto. No lo tomes entonces.
No, como yo no, quiero decir, no tome té,
No.
tome más café.
Pero de verdad, si no le gusta el té inglés,
No voy
no
a
le...
tomar.
Sí.
Nosotros te damos café.
My time at Lake Atitlan was an excellent introduction to Guatemala. From here, I returned to Antigua to get back onto the coffee trail. This beautifully preserved colonial city is set in a valley between 3 of the country's 37 volcanoes. The best way to truly appreciate these is to do the well-known hiking route up Acatenango and Fuego. Volcanic eruptions have blanketed the surrounding highlands with mineral-rich soil, making them an ideal location to cultivate high-quality coffee. On the way down from the summit of Acatenango, one of Guatemala's best coffee-growing regions stretches into the distance as far as the eye can see. But as I admired it all from above, it occurred to me that I had no knowledge of how coffee had arrived here in Guatemala in the first place. Legend has it that in the 9th century, an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaudi noticed that his goats became increasingly energetic and restless after eating the red berries of a particular plant. Kaudi took these berries to his village's local scholar, who tried them, disliked them, and threw them onto his fire. But it was the enticing coffee aroma from these roasting beans which inspired the idea to make a drink from them. By the 15th century, coffee had travelled northeast to Yemen, where it was first cultivated and traded. From there, it spread across the rest of the Arab world and was introduced to Europe shortly after, likely thanks to Venetian merchants operating in the Eastern Mediterranean and Ottoman Empire. Coffee quickly became very popular. In Britain, the first coffee house was opened in London by a Greek immigrant named Pasqua Rose in 1652. By 1733, 730 more had opened all across the country. Coffee houses became important intellectual hubs, home to caffeine-powered ideas and debates, and helped to usher in the Age of Enlightenment. Sir Isaac Newton once dissected a dolphin on a table at the Grecian Café in London. French writer and philosopher Voltaire famously drank around 50 cups of coffee per day, often mixed with chocolate, and lived until 84. It was popular stuff. In the surviving diaries of American Civil War soldiers, coffee was mentioned more times than the word bullet or rifle. In fact, one cavalryman from Missouri, Walter King, even designed a rifle with a built-in coffee grinder. And throughout the conflict, only the Union had consistent access to coffee. Coffee would go from helping to fuel individual soldiers to reshaping an entire country. After it arrived in Europe, Jesuit priests took coffee to Guatemala in the 1700s as an ornamental plant to decorate their monasteries. By 1880, coffee made up 92% of the country's exports. The 1871 Liberal Revolution in Guatemala laid the foundations that the coffee economy was built on. There were widespread seizures of vast communal lands that Maya people had lived and worked on for centuries that were then sold to private speculators to grow coffee on. New labour laws meant that entire communities were forced to work on the very plantations built upon the land stolen from them. The extreme inequality of land ownership rooted in this new coffee economy was a key factor in the breakout of the Guatemalan Civil War almost a century later. President Arbenz came to power in 1951. He aimed to continue with the era of progressive reform that had begun in Guatemala in 1944, with a central focus on land redistribution. This threatened not only the landowning coffee elite, but also the largest landowner in the country, the US-based United Fruit Company. Arbenz was overthrown in a CIA-backed military coup in 1954, and 6 short years later, civil war broke out in Guatemala. It lasted from 1960 until 1996, during which time over 200,000 Guatemalans were killed or forcibly disappeared. 83% of these victims were indigenous Maya. The 1980s saw the height of violence, including the silent Holocaust or genocide of Mayan communities. As a professor I spoke to from the University of San Carlos said to me, "You cannot separate coffee beans from their history." Having now learnt a little about their past, I felt ready to learn about the beans themselves. After a short tuk-tuk journey from Antigua, I arrived to the plantation that stands 5,450 miles away as the crow flies from my local cafe.
Prueba este, está más maduro.
So it's like a deeper red color.
Es mucho más dulce.
Y mucho más dulce.
Lo que sucede aquí es que el insecto vuela atraído por el olor
Y se pega ahí.
y se pega. Esto es un plato con pegamento.
Y ahora que estamos acá con vistas al volcán de agua, ¿qué tanto depende el café de la actividad volcánica?
Pues la Antigua en realidad son suelos volcánicos. Entonces eso es parte de lo que le da, lo que hablamos al inicio.
Sí.
El suelo, las condiciones climáticas le dan las características al café, porque el suelo es donde está el alimento que la planta extrae. Al ser suelos de origen volcánico, tienen otra composición que no tienen en otros lugares.
I would need to make a separate 2-hour video to show the brilliant, upbeat tour that the general manager gave me. The blend of science and art that underpins coffee production is far more complex than I had ever imagined. Having learned a little about the process from seed selection and harvesting to drying and milling and exportation, I thanked the manager and asked if I could speak to the workers behind it all. Unfortunately, this was where the tone changed a little. The answer was a resounding no. I tried to explain my intention of doing a short day in the life of a coffee worker style interview, but I had no luck. The reason for rejecting my proposition? To protect the workers' privacy. Disappointed, I left this particular plantation without answering one of the main questions I arrived with. As we know though, curiosity doesn't often fade with rejection. In the following days, I went to several other plantations in Guatemala to see if I could speak to anyone. Unfortunately, one worker enthusiastically agreed to share their thoughts and experiences on the Guatemalan coffee industry with me.
Si entran a investigar, les dan la caída. Lo que hacen ellos es soltarle un par de billetes
Al inspector.
Exacto. Entonces, lo que hacen ellos, así están pagando bien. ¿Va? Pero ¿quién se queda con el billete? Si aquí es puro negocio esa cosa. Es puro negocio porque les suelta un par de billetes acá y ya dice que están pagando bien, ahí está bien la finca. Pero no, son mentiras porque no es así. Entonces, aquí la gente se vende por 200, 300 quetzales, ¿va? Entonces, ni modo. Ellos lo que hacen es comprar al inspector, ¿va? Al Ministerio de Trabajo los compran. Es asunto arreglado. Ladrones. Más que todo el ladrón, ¿no? El que es consciente va a pagar y va a saber lo que vale el trabajo del campesino. Y mientras que el trabajador que se esté matando, ¿va? Eso le dice que es la mera verdad, pues, porque así es, pues. Lastimosamente nadie se anima a hablar, pues. Nadie dice lo que es.
¿Hay productores independientes acá?
Hay productores. Hay parceleros, le llaman esos.
Parceleros.
Parceleros, ajá. En este caso, mi consejo sería, ¿vale? Que vinieran a comprarle a la gente que son parceleros. Porque ustedes les van a pagar a ellos lo que ellos pidan por café, ¿vale?
Sí. Es mejor no ir a las grandes cadenas como Starbucks.
Empresas grandes se están haciendo ricos a costilla de la gente. Pobre, ¿vale? Entonces mi consejo sería de que le compren a la gente parcelera, ¿vale? Porque ellos también tienen necesidad de levantarse, pues.
Due to corruption in producer countries, anyone further up in the supply chain from here is flying blind. My cafe's coffee beans were sourced with the best intentions. The owners make a conscious effort to work with a middleman supplier company that has a good reputation for sourcing sustainably and ethically produced beans. However, coffee middlemen operate at a very large scale. It is therefore almost impossible for them to guarantee that every bag of beans arrives without any trace of malpractice or deception. To make matters worse, certification bodies often sell guarantees they have no way to enforce properly. A 2012 study by independent labour rights organisation Verité surveyed 372 coffee workers in Guatemala. 99% of the 372 interviewees reported that there were miners working on the last coffee farm they worked on. The CEO of Starbucks, Brian Nicole, received a compensation package of $96 million for his first 4 months of work as CEO in 2024. He continues to scrape by on a similar amount every year. Starbucks allows Nicole to use the company private jet for all of his personal and professional travel, and recently scrapped his $250,000 annual travel cap to allow for his unlimited usage. He commutes about 1,000 miles from his home in California to work at the Starbucks HQ in Seattle. Now, is Brian Nicole personally responsible for all of the injustices of the coffee industry? No. But based on documented figures from Channel 4's dispatches, it would take over 60,000 years for the child labourers that were found working on Guatemalan plantations that have previously supplied Starbucks to earn what Nicole made in just 4 months in 2024. The point is, as consumers, we can decide who and what our money flows towards. Nowadays, it is relatively simple to look for and find projects that are trying to make a meaningful change. As the brilliant historian of coffee, Professor Jonathan Morris, reminds us, the coffee trade has long continued to reproduce the structures of its colonial past. But we don't have to believe that there's nothing we can do about it, or that that's just how it is. One example I found is TechoVerde Coffee, a not-for-profit social enterprise that sells coffee beans in the UK. They're working with a local community of farmers in the unique cloud forests of Los Chilchos in northern Peru to produce high-quality special coffee for an export market. Farmers had always grown coffee here, but primarily for their own consumption, as market prices were typically too low or too volatile to justify the effort. Now, TechoVerde supplies each farmer with the necessary infrastructure, technical support and interest-free capital to begin cultivation and ensure it meets specialty coffee standards. The direct link between the farmer and the consumer that TechoVerde has established means that no middlemen are involved in the process. This ensures that nobody takes disproportionate profits or makes promises they simply cannot keep, whilst ensuring careful stewardship and preservation of the natural environment. From this small village, the organic coffee beans produced by the local community embark on a 2-day horseback trek to reach the nearest road. They are then shipped to the UK, where they are sold, and any surplus proceeds from sales are channeled back to the farmers who do the hard work, meaning they get paid far above market price. I set out with the simple intention to learn about the coffee I drink and make a video about it. I found a country with stunning volcanic highlands, home to warm and generous people who love their land. But I also learned about a supply chain that is inherently difficult to monitor properly, one which frequently allows for widespread exploitation. So my personal takeaway is to make a genuine effort to think more about whose hands the coffee I drink passes through to get to me, and whose pockets the money I spend on it will end up lining.